George and Daniel by their parents,
Right.
who really everything that they do is a reflection and honor of Joseph and Marie.
That's amazing. So they come out of this college, they have their thing, they create this fancy, not fancy, but successful internet company, and then the first thing they want to do is reinvest that into a lifestyle and produce a product that really goes back to their roots,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It's funny you said that about buying chateau or trying to invest in France, and it's so difficult to do business in France. It's impossible to get a visa to do that, to even work there more than 90 days, and then let alone in Bordeaux's a little easier, I think, to buy a piece of property and invest in a chateau. But uh, I had the Paulmeyer group in here, the Wayfarer group in here, and they were telling the story about the Paulmeyers having being in escrow for some very small parcels in Burgundy, which is a way different environment
Yeah.
than Bordeaux.
Way different.
And just before it was supposed to close, the government pulls out this obscure, probably 12th century rule that they can override the whole purchase, and they didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then that's what drove them to Sonoma. But
Well, and then my old CEO at Opus One, David Pearson.
Yeah.
He was working on a Mondavi project in the south of France to create the French Robert Mondavi, for lack of a better word. And he invested 5, 6, 7 years of his life in trying to get this off the ground, living in the area, and it got shut down.
Wow, he just left the Opus last year.
Yeah,
or
he
before.
left. Yeah, he was at COVID. He left.
Yeah.
Yes, in the middle of 2020.
Actually, I texted him or I messaged him. He's put him on the show here pretty soon.
Yeah, he's really
Interesting guy.
interesting. I mean, I think he had he's really. If you want to look at an American who is truly French, that's
Really?
David Pearson. I mean, he's a French major, so he speaks fluent French, and so he's a really fascinating guy.
I know how hard that is.
And he went to work. I think he went to work for the Harlans after his Opus.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, but then the fire occurred, and all sorts of things transpired kind of when that happened. So that was kind of bad luck.
How does Paso look as the new frontier? Because it's still rural. I just real fast. I had 60 acres on Martingale Circle, which is Australia River Road, and I realized I'm never going to go there. I can't farm anything, and I guess work on this side of the business. I get it now, and so we end up selling it. But it was so rural then. This is, I don't know, probably late 90s.
Yeah.
And you go downtown, and it was thrift shops and cowboy stores.
Yeah.
And now there's restaurants, and the square's busy, and you go both sides of the square.
Yeah, it's still, to your point, you think of what you mentioned the Judgment of Paris, 76, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then you think of when Opus One was created, when the Baron invited Robert to be, Napa was, a little bit like Paso back in those days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Paso that I've now come to love, because I've been there now with Patrimony as the VP there since January of last year, is like what you said. It's still kind of a mixture of rural, and now you're starting to see these like little boutique hotels pop up. You're starting to see. They just got, I forgot the name of it, their first Michelin star restaurant.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
George and Daniel purchased an old bank that they're going to turn into a tasting room in downtown
Wow.
Paso.
Yeah.
And you've got some really wonderful restaurants now, but it still has that feel of being a small town.
Well, so does the rodeo. I mean, that's gonna as long as it has the rodeo.
Well, my favorite bar is called the Rodeo.
Yeah, so you're gonna be. You keep that. I still have some cowboy wear that I bought. My boots, and I bought some stuff at the store. And the bowling alley, that's sort of like a tilt-up building. Is that still running, that bowling alley?
I don't know, to be honest.
It's down just outside of town as you head the other way. I wanted to buy it so badly because I thought it was so cool.
I think in terms of, what George and Daniel have done. They created in Cambria. They bought Dow Ocean, which still they're working on permitting process. We have the new Patrimony Estate that's going to, we're getting the permitting processes going on that. So, I mean, if in 10 to 15 years, come back to Paso Robles and see what it's going to be like. Because, George and Daniel are truly putting Cabernet on the map in Paso as a world-class appellation for growing Cabernet. And what I find very telling is I've been in some restaurants dining with friends, and I'll have someone say, "Hey, that's so and so from Napa Valley," because they're all looking at the fruit that can be produced, the beautiful Cabernet that can be produced in Paso, in Adelaida now, and that's kind of a real testament to the fact that this area is going to be a world-class Cabernet producing region.
Well, these two are clearly world class in the structure and the quality and the pedigree of the character. I mean, there's no question. It's funny. You remember in the 80s and the 90s, Paso was the Martin Brothers, and there were a lot of Italian varietals out there. The Rhone varietals really hadn't taken hold yet, and now we're starting to see that the Rhone varietals, the west side of Paso, the 101 side, that's where they seem to thrive. On the hot side, the Cabernets and the Bordeaux varietals seem to do well. It's interesting to see it evolve, and it takes time. It's interesting for the listeners. You only get it's every 12 months it cycles through, right? It's a long time to learn something about what's happening here, right? Yeah. And for the evolution of the grapes they're growing already, just since I've been in this industry, is pretty interesting to watch. And who knows what's next? But clearly, if we're producing wines like Patrimony that have the structure they have, they're almost past their years in tenure. In other words, they taste more than their 10th vintage or whatever it is.
Oh, right. Yeah. Right? Well, yeah. Actually, 13 was the first vintage for.
Okay, so 8 vintages, 9 vintages.
Yeah, we just went commercial too. We released the 16 and 17 Patrimony 6 months ago. So this wine just went into the 3-tier system.
Wow.
I mean, the production levels are so tiny. The Cab Franc is a 100 case, 109 liter cases, and the 100% Cabernet is 500 cases. So
wow.
But we have great distribution nationwide. We're already exporting the wine into some European countries. I just hosted our Danish importer. A little plug to Wally's. Beverly Hills, of course. Last week. So
that's right there. It's not right there. Wally's Beverly Hills is a great place for the listeners if you haven't been. It's just an amazing success story in the wine world as well as restaurants. But tell me, by the glass, what this Patrimony costs there.
Okay, so the Patrimony.
Hang on to your hats, folks.
Okay, so the Patrimony is $85 a glass for a 4-ounce pour.
A 4-ounce pour.
4-ounce pour. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's
that's one of the I hate.
That's actually, when it comes to the calculation of wine being poured at a restaurant, that's actually cheap, inexpensive
for a world-class wine at that price point. Is
because the bottle is retail. How much is the bottle?
Yeah, close to $300.
Right. Okay. So usually the restaurant's going to want their bottle cost back in the first glass, and they're not getting it here.
Yeah.
But I suppose the idea around being able to pour a glass like that and be able to buy a glass like that is pretty unique.
Well, it is. It's unique because sometimes you won't want to afford buying a $300 bottle, but now for $85, I can get a glass.
You get a glass and taste it.
It's maybe one of the greatest ways to promote a high-end luxury wine by pouring it by the glass. Yeah. That's why the advent of the Coravan has been such a boom, because you now get to try a world-class wine and not have to, let's just say you're trying Echem for $100 a glass.
$100. And you only get a 2-ounce pour.
Well, you do, but at least you have the opportunity to sample a world-class wine without having to go full boat on the bottle.
Sure. If I head to Paso, as this Paso Robles Fanatics site kind of supports all that kind of travel and tourism, what would you recommend? What season would you recommend if somebody goes to Paso in, and where should they go for sure?
Oh, this seasonally, I mean, gosh, right now it's pretty beautiful, and through spring, fall obviously is beautiful. During harvest is beautiful. It probably gets a little warmer, like it does in Napa Valley or any other place in the in grape growing world. But I personally always love to go to. Like I was just in Bordeaux in September. That was such a beautiful time to visit. So I love going to any grape growing region in the fall because you get a feel of what's going on with the picking.
So after the harvest or during the harvest, because then you can't talk to anybody because everybody's so busy.
That's why I went to I was in Bordeaux in September. So in Napa, I always like to go right in September too, but right before the full blown picking begins, because you get the feel of the energy, and that energy is the energy of being in a grape growing culture during harvest is second to none. I mean, it's just that's what the culmination of the year is all led up to this time for picking. And
it's why they have the harvest festivals and why Beaujolais Nouveau comes out, and it's just
when you listen to Neil Young.
Why is that? That's right. But why is that? Why? I ask this question a lot, but it's framed differently now that you brought it that. Why is that so special? What is it about picking the grapes and knowing that this vintage was coming and that there's just a celebration around it? Is it just I'm not going to say historical, ancient?
Wow, it's just such a good
Or is
question.
it just a human thing? It's just something that goes right to our soul that there's something beneficial about this grape. Tough one, huh?
It is such a complex. I mean, it takes on so many layers of complexity. For a winery that starts in January, then you start doing pruning in February and March or February for the most part. But it's like there's so many different stages and build up to till you get to
get there.
Harvest, right? And it's not like it's a lead up to something that culminates into something bigger. Right, and it's like it's the reward. The harvest is the reward for all the hard work of the first 8-9 months and everything that you've done to produce a world class wine. So that's why you have such festivals.
Rooted in that. Okay, now we've picked the grapes and you don't get all excited when you harvest pineapples. You don't get excited when you harvest apricots. You get excited when you harvest grapes.
Well,
and there's
Jesus
something
didn't turn pineapple juice into or water into pineapple, right? He turned
there's something ethereal about it.
Yes.
It's really hard to pin down. That's why I challenged you with the question.
You go back to the Romans, right?
I suppose.
Amphora, you go back to the Greeks.
Yeah, but why them? Why do they care?
They stumbled onto this magical grape, that, and the fact that it ages, like you put away a bottle of wine for when your son or your daughter is born, and they get to drink it 20-something years later, and there's something David Pearson at Opus and Daniel. It's all about the experience. Like when you go to Dow Mountain and when you'll go to the Patrimony Estate, wine is the conduit for connecting people. Like, you could be like, you think
that's the key.
It is, and you think of you just think of all the great times you spent with people over a great bottle of wine, and you may not remember what you did with them, 5 years or 10 years ago, but you'll say, do you remember when we drank that beautiful bottle of Patrimony, or we had that great bottle of Opus, or we had that Lafite? Do you remember when we were in the heart of Bordeaux and we were drinking, Vouvray and had oysters?
Interesting is that connector is amazing.
Yeah, and it's passion. It's the love of the lifestyle too. And
we just finished a real estate transaction, and it was really over a bottle of DRC.
Well, can I be a part of your?
Well, no, I mean, I didn't open it. we just looked at it. No, we actually, the long story, so I can tell the whole thing. But eventually, the developer, who's a very well-known LA developer, said, I really just finished this deal because I wanted those DRCs. I promised him a bottle of Latage as part of the transaction, and he was motivated by this. And I'm like, cool. And the conversation originally that even introduced the idea of this piece of real estate for him to develop was over a Grand Cru Burgundy. And I tell the story all the time because it's exactly what you're saying. It's the connector.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's not, even though wine is an intimidating subject for a lot of people, and they don't want to approach it necessarily, but once they get that glass, it is something that they really understand that is really good.
Yeah.
I mean, people can't describe it. We understand typically it's hard to do. It's hard for me to do sometimes.
Yeah.
But when you taste it
Yeah.
that this is something special.
Yeah.
And it changes the complexity of the conversation.
Yeah.
It changes the direction of the conversation. It changes the relationship. And this one deal was over a glass of Grand Cru Volnay, I think it was, or it was a Clos Vougeot.
Yeah.
Clos de Vougeot.
Yeah. And then when you get into Burgundy, that's this other ethereal,
Yeah, that's like crazy.
grape, and you mentioned DRC, and I remember having an executive I was trying to connect with many years ago. I won't go into the details, but I really, a wine executive, and so I said, let's go out to dinner, and I did a little research, and I found that he loved Burgundy, and I said, oh, what the heck, I'm gonna go and find a restaurant that I could buy some DRC at, and when I didn't tell him, but when that bottle of, I think it was Romani Saint Vivant came out, it was like
Wow.
we were. It was the biggest bromance after that you could possibly imagine, but it was all over a bottle of DRC.
Yeah.
And understanding like that, his love for that wine.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
And
Burgundy is
that's
such
something.
a unique area.
I think you and I will continue to try, easy for you to say, and define what that space is that creates this value to a glass of wine. And on that note, I'm headed to Napa in about 2 hours, and we're going to start all over again with that conversation. We're coming on an hour already. I really appreciate you coming in.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's great.
I appreciate you coming in and having chats. It's really good to see you again after all these years.
Great. Really
And we'll come see you at Patrimony or Dow. And I was up, I don't know, during COVID, we went up and did some podcasting. I saw Andy Niner and I saw Austin Hope, and we'll like to come up again and see you guys up there.
Well, if I might invite you to come and visit us, and so part of the Patrimony team, there's 5 of us, but we brought with us as our estate director for Patrimony, because it's in the middle of being built, as I mentioned, Eric Johnson, who was the wine director for the French Laundry.
Really? Wow.
So he's our estate director up at Dow, and when Patrimony's built, he will. So I would love to curate a beautiful tasting experience
really
for
fun.
you,
Really fun.
and get
I
you
appreciate
with
that.
Daniel.
I had to finish with this funny story. We were up, and we're going to Yountville, obviously, tonight. And there's I don't know if you know.
Where are you staying?
The Vintage House,
No, not sure.
Yountville, according to Joanne Dupuis, who is the woman who took Stephen Spurrier around in Napa to find Freemark Abbey and Stag's Leap and Chateau Montelena.
Right.
She's 94. She's a wonderful woman, very sharp. She said Yountville in the 40s, when they moved there, 49, until almost recently, was the motorcycle veterans hangout. I mean, you didn't go there. You just didn't go there. It's too dangerous to go to Yountville.
Yeah,
okay?
Ponches.
Right. So listen to this. I'm glad you brought that up. So we were up there, and my wife and I were thinking maybe we would dabble in a little townhouse or something to have, to go visit. And I saw Ponchas. And now the roof is sagging, and Ponchas, just for the folks, is on Washington Street. It's a few doors down from the French Laundry. But it's a sagging, over-stuccoed building on a pretty good sized good sized piece of land, right? I mean, there's a parking lot.
Totally. It's been in the family for years.
So I'm talking to the real estate agent. I said, my good friend is Joachim Splichal, and he's a chef, and I would love to talk to him about, syndicating a restaurant up here. How, what's going on with the Ponchas property? Figured it's just down the street from.
Yeah.
Oh, we're full. We're full here at French Laundry. Why don't you go down the street to my other restaurant? So
Yeah.
she says, "Why? I had dinner with the owner the other night." I go, "Really?" So I go, "What do you think?" She goes, "He'd sell." She goes, 10 to 14 million.
Oh, yeah.
For this little piece of land in this stucco building with the broken ice machine, It's like, I couldn't believe it.
Where you still see people in there smoking and shooting pool. And
Yeah, exactly.
one last little anecdote. I was in there 4 or 5 years ago, and I was at the bar, and it's a
Yeah,
let's just be
for sure.
straight. It's a dive bar, right?
Yeah, it is.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm about to have a drink, and this guy in a leather jacket who just pulled up on a Harley sits next to me, and he looks at me, and I'm in a suit, He's in his leather biking outfit.
It's like a velvet painting, you know.
Really, it was really like the dichotomy of cultures. And he looks at me and he says, "Hey, what are you drinking?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna have a beer." He goes, "Have a Jack and Coke with me." I'm like, "Cool." I said, and then he started telling me about his. He goes, "Yeah, I'm in the Hells Angels, and
whoa,
and this is my hangout. You know, where we've been coming for years."
Wow.
And we sat and had a couple Jack and Cokes.
That's
I wouldn't normally
funny.
drink.
What a great thing.
But we just really had a great time.
What I just said
Exactly.
is exactly what you just happened.
Exactly.
Right? The old guy, the veteran, or who the motorcycle guy sitting with the suited guy who's in the wine business. Wow, that is really funny.
Yeah, and the integration of these cultures, going back to what you said about, it was, in the 40s, it was kind of a hard place. So,
yeah, very hard. So interesting. Anyway, great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
It was
cheers.
such a pleasure, Paul.
My pleasure. Good luck today.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Cheers. Print it. That was great. That was fun.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. God, it's great. I mean, it's just great to